I'm live, it tells me. And it also tells me that one person is already here, which is delightful. Are you here? Hello, if you are. I'm Jeremy Sherman. You know me. We're having a conversation about whatever today with those of now there are two people here. Nice to see you. Feel free to say something in the chat so I know who you are. And there's Michael. Hello, Michael. Hey, how's it hanging? I hope it's good. And there's Kyle. Fabulous. I haven't heard from you in a little while. Nice to see you, Kyle. Uh, Let me know if there's anything in particular you want to talk about. After the election, dealing with the burden on all of our hearts, um, I I turned my attention back to the origins of life work. I just put out about an hour ago, maybe 2 hours ago, the last in a series of videos I did on what the actual fuck we are. Um, and I lost some viewers doing that because people want some of me, but perhaps not that. In fact, 5 minutes ago, I wrote this. It's not perfect, but it's getting there. Here it is. I know there is a lot of me. I've considered a lobotomy, but that's not in the cards. Uh, yeah, no, it's not. It's the rhyme is off. It doesn't scan. Many get too much of me and call a such and such of me and won't let down their guards. Just take what you can use from me. Me, I've grown quite used to me, though what I am bombards. I wrote it after reading an article in the New Yorker uh, that happened to come out today about my old buddy. Uh, no, it's by my old buddy, Louise Glick. She was a Nobel Prize, Pulitzer Prize winning poet who happened to live across the street from me. And we became best friends, even though we were almost complete opposites. I was her California best friend, and she was out here for a month. And it's an article in the New Yorker, I guess, this week by her about what writing was for her. Writing was very different for her than it is for me. Um, and she was an example of someone who would get too much of me. Towards the end of our relationship, she died at 80, maybe a year and a half ago. But she got interested in the origins of life work and would ask me about it. And as I would start to tell her about it, she would get livid, just livid. Um, it was a good emblem of what went on in our in. It was a good illustration of the differences between us. She's a lyric poet. Her poetry um, is uh, is not my stuff. I tend to go towards stuff that's got a little more grit and a little more world in it. Hey there, RMS. So anyway, she would get livid in a way that helped inspire the articles I've been writing on what the actual fuck we are, the videos I've been making. I'm just used to writing articles, and then they turned into scripts for videos. Uh, this thing I've been calling autophobia, fear of self knowledge, which is not the same uh, as having no identity. We have identities that are load bearing for us. For example, a Christian will have an identity. I had an encounter with a Christian just now on Facebook. Their identity is built on it. But to understand what the actual fuck we are, Louise Glick, this Nobel Prize winning poet, would just slam me. She'd ask one or two questions and then she'd slam me, and it was darling. I mean, we had an easy relationship because we were able to be feisty with each other. She was just feisty by temperament, and so am I. And I love a friendship like that. I love a friendship that can tolerate a brawl. And we'd have it in the fanciest restaurant in Berkeley. We would be sitting there, and she just said, "You should not try to figure out what we are scientifically. That is not an appropriate behavior for a human being." I would also tell her about my adventures in, let's say, Mexico, and she was really high strung. She once said to me that she was the most anxious person she knew, and I had to suggest to her that she was the most anxious person she knew from the inside. There lots of people are probably more anxious, but she had a prickly side, and it was probably also enhanced by the fact that she had won a Nobel Prize and a Pulitzer and a National Book Award, and she was 2 times the poet laureate for the United States. I mean, she's quite the character. I mean, she weighed maybe 90 pounds. She didn't finish college. She taught at Yale. Um, Bless her heart. We had a fun time, and she would always back down when she got intense like that, because I was not vulnerable to it. I remember one time she looks at me and she says, "You're not a poet." Fair enough. I mean, it's kind of an honor to not be a poet in the eyes of a Nobel laureate. Anyway, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in there, uh, and I yeah, I love a relationship like that, and part of it is not being vulnerable to the scorn, which is, I think, a way that I'm going to be bringing psychoproctology back to the fore. Um, I've been working with a YouTube coach on how to get a bit more audience, because I had a hot audience for a little while and then it cooled way down. Um, my relationship to audience is complicated. I noticed. So I've been unpartnered for 10 years. I'm retired from that stuff. I'm a combination of jaded and it's not worth it. Um, uh, so so I retired from it, and there was a period maybe 6 months ago, before I hit on YouTube at all, um, when I was feeling the absence of partners. Um, Not that I wanted one, but that I wanted that excitement, the feeling of being seen by someone. And then I hit on YouTube, and it immediately dissipated. And this relates to one of the videos I put out this week, this one about where you get your mojo from, basically egotainment. And it's basically a shopping guide to the varieties of ways in which one can get their confidence boost. We often talk about it as stress reduction. I think that's a euphemism. I think we need our confidence, and we'll take it wherever we can get it. And that people, if you want to predict people's behavior, a good way to go about it is to look at where they're getting their reassurance, look at where they're getting their affirmation. That predicts it's easy to you can figure out what's really driving someone, obviously beyond money and other survival needs. What they call self-actualization, I think, is probably closer to a kind of self affirmation that humans like. That is, a whole lot of what we call wisdom is actually egotainment. It's a way to feel good. Thank you, Michael. That video got like 250 views, which is ironic because it's all about egotainment, and it's where I'm addicted to egotainment is getting some views. Um, that's delightful to hear that from you, Michael. So what I'm talking about is the fungibility, the movability of affirmation. So I thought I needed more dinners with female friends. Friends without benefits, because the benefits always confuse the friendships. But at my age, at 68, there's a way in which I feel like um, I don't want the whole package anymore. The upholstery is too old. I don't need to go to bed with anybody. I don't want to fuck. I would still like the affirmation of being fuckable. And there's something about I've tried this a bunch with a variety of women. This thing where maybe at 68 or whatever age we are, sometimes older, we can just enjoy the residues, the residues of what once was. Going out to dinner, having a nice conversation, gazing into each other's eyes, having fun together, but not the whole complicated mess. And of all the women I did that with, Louise was the cleanest, in part because she was 80 and I'm 68. There was a way in which that wasn't on the cards for either of us. I would say flattering things to her. She would tell me that she loved me, but she didn't, but it was a platonic love. So in a way, I'm talking about platonic love. Um, and I would say that in the last month, with videos getting less views, I'm watching my own need for affirmation So I thought I was getting it from women for a while before I thought it was too complicated and I was too jaded on it. It wasn't worth it. That declined. YouTube went up. Suddenly I'm addicted to views, and now I'm weaning myself off of that. Um, and there's something about this stage in life where you start to be weaning yourself off of different things that are just not feasible anymore. One of the things I touched on in that video, um, uh, uh, hi, Linda. It's nice to see you here. Yes, it is fascinating and scary that the century of the self, and in a way, that's exactly what I'm talking about here. Is this human appetite for affirmation, um, which I don't consider. I mean, I consider it dangerous. I consider it necessary. I think we need it. If there's one driving thought in across all of this work, it's what it's like to be a language using species, what it's like to be driving under the influence of language. Um, and uh, and it makes us an incredibly anxious species compared to other species. I mean, just no contest. Franz Kafka wrote that book in which a guy turns into a bug overnight, Gregor Samsa in Metamorphosis. I think it'd be harder for the bug to turn into a human being overnight. The thoughts, the anxieties, the possibilities, the what ifs and if onlys that flood into one's mind, and the need, therefore, for reassurance that we just need it. So Linda, what I took from the Century of the Self was this recognition that we have to figure out better ways to exercise and manage our need for egotainment. And, I've called it by different things: optimal illusion, strategic gullibility, safe escapism, off jerking. These are all names for this behavior that we don't talk about. It's taboo to talk about it. We can talk about how we want love. We can talk about how we want sex. We cannot talk about how we need reassurance so we don't feel so needy. We need to not admit that we need reassurance to not feel so needy. And I just think that's one of the hardest things and the funniest things about us human beings, how we need it. And so one of the things I end up doing is a lot of speaking for myself, as I'm doing here. I'm describing to you, you could say, the economics I've been in, the microeconomics of the holiday season, with a decline in the affirmation I was getting from viewers, and no women to hang out with in that platonic way that I enjoy, um, and a general sense that of both jadedness. That is, at 68, I know the drill. I, 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 I know how things go. I know ups become downs. Um, and uh, and and also a sense that things aren't worth it as much, which is in part noticing their costs, and also being jaded a little bit less of the benefits coming through. So for you youngsters, and I think everybody here is younger than me, which means I'm older than you and must know better. No, there's a tendency in old folks to think that they're officially wise simply because they're old, which is not the case at all. It's so not the case. Um, uh, what used to be charming character traits become character flaws, exaggerated. We become caricatures of ourselves. We become deformed, both physically, like arthritis, but also, you could say the hardening of the smarteries is what I call it. Uh, Hello, Jackknife. Nice to see you here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Anybody got anything they want to talk about? I'm just rambling, as is my wont. Anybody got anything? Psychoproctology and the origins of life. Michael, I'm glad you get that. That's what it's basically one thing to me. I'm trying to work that entire continuum, which starts with the struggle for existence, which I've been, selves making functional interpretive effort to keep on being selves. And then the evolution of emotions, which are intense and convincing. I once mentioned Louise Glick, the poet, was complaining about something. I said, yeah, emotions are evolved to be highly convincing. And she really swooned over that. She thought that was the right word for it. They are. They are the most convincing thing for us. The ideas are a thin overlay on them, usually designed to make us feel better. That is, comfort in our own skin, and how to get it is a big thing. Uh, um, Yes, there we go. And the psychoproctology certainly follows. That was here. I am responding to Michael's comment here, that he gets it. He's with me on that. Your case is compelling that they are linked. Yeah, and I think they're linked through language. Every animal is a parasite except for a few very abiotic species, mostly at the origins of life. That is, you would have to be uh, um, uh, autonomous. You couldn't be a parasitic virus at the origins of life because there's nothing to parasite on. But asshole is a human thing. There are, and once you start to notice what language does and how it's radically different from other forms of communication or semiotics, that is how something becomes significant to an organism, um, you really start to notice that it's entirely predictable that if you had humans, what do you get when you cross language, you cross emotions, intense, convincing emotions with language? You get language that tends to reassure the emotions. That's what you would get. And you'd get that here, you'd get that on any planet where we had intelligent life. By intelligent life, I mean organisms that are symbol competent. So I might, in this video, get into a little bit of a difference between what goes on in language and what goes on in other semiotic systems, the basically indexes and icons, which all organisms are able to interpret to some degree. Um, let's see. I am interested in, Jackknife is saying, I'm interested in frameworks to think about what we do. One of all goals One is all goals fall under health, wealth, and relationships. Another is know thyself and pick a goal based on personality type. Good. I'm going to speak to that. And in a way, I already am. I'm already talking about that. I am offering a framework. There are tons of frameworks. There are so many frameworks. We realize that you have alternatives. I am proposing one that's a little different, um, methodologically. So so you say all goals fall under health, wealth, and relationships. Let me think about that a minute. Uh, I would say that, let me start with the origins of life, because I want to offer my framework clearly, and then let's see whether health, wealth, and relationships, where they fit and whether it's all encompassing. I don't think it is, but I don't guess it is, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay. So starting with the origins of life, let me just say something about the frameworks first. My framework is different. It could be wrong, it could be bad, it could be stupid, it could be impractical, but my framework is different. Um, all of the other frameworks I've ever met, and I've met quite a lot of them, because of the work I do and having to keep up on everybody else's theory, um, is done phenomenologically. Louise Glick, the poet, the Nobel poet, was a phenomenologist. It's based on feelings and experiences. So you ignore reality and say, what is it like to be me? And then from you, or what are my impressions of the outside world? From you, you can come up with impressions about the outside world. Mine, and the variety is vast, because anybody can posit something in the outside world. A simple example would be positing God or a higher power. You simply have an intuition that they exist, and then you build your framework on that assumption. Um, and and you can do that in the sciences too. You can simply posit a thing called motivation, and then build your assumptions based on it. But if you talk to any life or social scientists about what a motivation actually is, they can't tell you. Some admit that they can't tell you. Some give you an alternative to an operational explanation of what it is. They simply say, "Well, if you see effort, you assume motivation." I was at a party at the American Psychology Association, and I happened into conversation with this cat who was the head of the science division for the American Psychology Association. We both had drinks in our hands. We got talking. He said that he was inspired to do this work, um, the science side of psychology, by the free will question. And here he was decades into his career. And I asked, "So what'd you decide?" He said, "We don't have it. We're just machines." And I challenged him. I said, "Okay, well, so, so then what is the motivation?" And he said, "It's just a mechanical operation." Um, and I said, "Then what is inspiration? You said you were inspired to do this work by that." We didn't resolve it, but it was just, I mean, I was talking to the head of the science division, but it was charming to me how he went at it. So you can come up with a version that's got God, you can come up with a version that's got no agency, no motivation. We're just machines. That's called eliminativism. You can come up with a model that says that everything, all atoms are trying to do things. That's called panpsychism. You can mix and match them, which is what you mostly get, which is people who say, well, motivations, let's take the selfish gene example. No, genes aren't really selfish. They just act like they're selfish because like they're motivated, like they're self-motivated. But no, really, they're just machines. There's a kind of equivocation you can do where you dance between the ghost and machine model. And then there's also a position that's called Mysterian. It was named by a philosopher friend of mine at Tufts. I forget where he is. Duke. He's a Duke. But anyway, Mysterian is to throw up your hands and say it's impossible for us to know. There's a scientific inexplicable magic. So back to Jackknife, I am framing it differently. I'm saying that if we start with the most fundamental thing in the universe, which they call the second law of thermodynamics, which is a terrible name for it, it's not a law, it's not the second, but it's basically what I've come to call randoming. That is, any order will tend to become random over time. It's not a law, it's a statistical property. It's simply that there are more possible randomized states than when you there are more random states than orderly states. And so we're up against that because I've got to keep myself in working order. So the struggle for existence, selves making functional interpretive effort, is where I have to start, Jackknife, in order to come up with my framework. And for that, I need 4 qualities, and they have to be maintaining themselves. So I think of myself as a cluster flux. That is, I'm fluid. I'm not boundary, but I'm not boundaried by anything. I got walls in my house and all that, but internally I'm not. I've got some hard surfaces, some solids like my teeth, but other than that, I am mostly fluid. And I'm fluid that's trying to keep myself in order. And so I'm not doing it by durability the way a machine does. I have to keep on regenerating myself. And so if I'm going to do that, I have to do if I'm going to stay a being, I have to make functional interpretive effort. Effort is a kind of physical work. It's a subset of physical work. Well, there's all sorts of physical work in the world. Every time 2 molecules bump into each other, they work on each other. But this is a subset. It's a constrained subset. I'm mostly constraining myself, keeping myself in working order rather than falling apart, even though I'm falling apart slowly as it is. I mentioned arthritis a little while ago. So functional means good versus bad, better versus worse. It's what we mean by an adaptation. Um, you want, so to me, at the origins of life is when you get the difference between good or bad. Nothing is good or bad in this universe for the first 10 billion years, at least in this neck of the woods. Probably started elsewhere. But to talk about what's good, you need a beneficiary, good for someone. And so even those people who say that everything is good for God, they're imagining some being that is making functional interpretive effort, God, um, who that is he's trying to make things go a certain way and not other ways, which means that he's channeling his work. He's not doing anything. He's not just dithering. He's trying to get some work done. And it's interpretive, which is different from cause and effect. It's built out of cause and effect. When I interpret a stop sign, that's all physical, but it's not just physical. It's a whole system. My eyes, my legs, my muscles, everything, um, all conspiring to keep me alive. The difference between interpretation and non-interpretation is it and causality is very important to me. As you've probably seen in my videos, I say a stop sign doesn't cause you to stop unless you crash into it. You're interpreting it. Interpretation is different. So functional interpretive effort. Now let's go to Jackknife's point here. Let's see. Our goals fall. I think you meant fall under. You say full under, but I think you probably meant fall. Totally fine. Health, wealth, and relationships. So health is what I've been talking about. Um, that is, every organism, the simplest bacterium is after well-being. They're doing work that works to keep them working in their workspace. That's another framing of it. Work that works is functional effort to keep a chemical system in order. That's what I am. I'm a being. I'm trying to remain a being. Um, Within its workspace is a huge part of this, which includes relationships. Now, let's talk about so wealth is really important here. I mentioned this. I can't. Yeah, I think I can't remember if I posted it here. If you're not my friend on Facebook, feel free to join me if I'm not too much as it is. I'm Jeremy Unsure Sherman, and I mentioned this there. Um, One thing we don't notice much, my research colleague is writing a book about it, is that wealth or uh, more than enough is necessary. Given the second law, given that everything is falling towards disorder, everything is randomizing, it's not enough to operate at replacement rate. You can't do a one-to-one replication and expect to survive for any length of time. All organisms overproduce. And so there is something about wealth that is very relevant. Now, what do we mean by wealth? There are limitations on how much an animal can store in fat, in secret caches, that sort of thing. Um, but there is this appetite in humans to gain insurmountable wealth and the capacity to do so. So for me, a big difference between natural capitalism and the kind of capitalism that humans deal with is that natural capitalism, yeah, all organisms have been competing and cooperating in the pursuit of real world resources. But humans, given language, given symbolic competence, which I can come back to, can collect up what's called intersubjective values. So status would be an example. Money would be another. Money is a classic example of an intersubjective reality. Um, it's not it's not a physical resource, but it is maintained by all of us agreeing on its worth. So that's what they mean by intersubjective. Language is also intersubjective. As I was born parasitic on a culture that maintained a language that I could learn as a way of communicating with everybody. Yes, relationships are important in that respect. Money is another thing that we end up accumulating that way. So it raises a really interesting question about where do you draw the line between saving for a rainy day and wealth and greed and greed. I think there is a line, but it's hard to draw. That is because the future is unknown. We don't know what tomorrow will bring, whether how rainy it will be. Um, Relationships are a huge part of this. This is a huge part of the parasitic nature of us at our birth. That is, I was born not knowing this world. I was born neotenous, immature. A horse jumps up, a foal jumps up and is running in no time. We are born actually less developed than other creatures with enormous plasticity, which is whereby we can learn different languages, different cultures, all of that. It's part of our capacity to expand and adapt to everything. Is that we're actually born neotenous, born immature. Okay, relationships interesting. So here's how I would think about it, Jackknife. I'm still working your question. I hope you're still here, and I hope you're finding this useful and not too meandering. Um, my health includes my emotional health. I would argue that there's it feels like a higher priority than my physical health. I'm not speaking for me. I'm a relatively disciplined guy, but I have my slop. But what I'm saying is that people will often opt for pleasure or comfort, um, or feeling like legends in their own mind, or taking drugs that are not great for their health, but they feel great um, emotionally. And so health is a complicated one. Wealth is also part of this reassurance I'm talking about that humans would need, is a sense that we have savings for the rainy day. Relationships are a huge part of it. You might have seen this in my videos that I distinguish between libido and libigo. That is, when I think back on most of my partnerships, early on, there was a whole lot of libido. Later on, I think it was much more libigo. That is, I needed the affirmation of a partner, um, uh, who or a score. I had monogamous relationships. I was married for 16 and a half years. Um, uh, uh, and but it was much more about the affirmation, and I would say that that's also what I'm missing when I don't feel like I've got the local placebo um, interactions with women. They were a major source of affirmation for me in my life. Early on, I coined the term endorphin for the endorphin rush of being endorsed. And by the way, I want to say I'm trying to read as an open book. I assume that I've got that what other people do, I do too, and what I do, other people do too, to some degree. Questions of degree matter a lot. Um, to Michael's point, I did make a T-shirt at one point that said, "Live each lifetime as if it's your last," just to be a paradox. Um, uh, then I noticed that it actually cuts both ways, and it's a paradox because if you're only living once, you could you can do whatever because you're not coming back. You don't have to worry about it. We even have this problem. Giuliani and Trump have both been quoted as saying, "What do I care about my legacy? I'll be dead." So there is that side to it too. But the other version of it is, make each day count. Live each lifetime as if it's your last. One last thing on that, Michael, and then I'll get right back to what I'm talking about with Jackknife. There, here's another paradox I love, which is that, and I made it up. It's that if you only live once, or if you only live for a short time, you don't have to be very realistic at all, and you can go ahead and believe in reincarnation. But if you're going to reincarnate, if you're going to keep on coming back, then you have to be realistic and admit that there's no such thing as reincarnation. I do have a limerick about it. Reincarnation is real. Just how will reduce its appeal? It's your seeds and your deeds, not your soul. It recedes, hopping off after once round the wheel. Okay, so coming back to Jackknife, all three of the ones you mentioned are things that I think we feel um, motivated by. And I just see what you wrote here, and I think I can lay out the three categories, and they're a little different from what you're describing here, and see what you think of it. No one's under any obligation to believe anything I say. I'm just positing ideas as far as I've taken them. So I would distinguish three different realms, but they aren't labeled like yours. And I would say they are the liked, the likable, and the likely. So let me play this out for you. The liked is what's socially liked around you. It's what your local society believes. It's another one of these inheritances that we modify over the course of our lives. If, for example, you divorce your parents' religion or something like that, but it's what's locally liked. And since we care about relationship, we care about fitting in with the like story. But why do we care about it? Mostly because we are drawn to what's likable. So affirmation is very likable. What do I mean by likable? It's the emotional comfort that we can get from things like health, wealth, relationships, all the forms of egotainment. It's stuff that makes me feel better. That's what I mean by likable. And then and that to me, that seems like the highest priority for most people is that they want to feel good now. It's the most urgent priority. You know what it's like to not feel good. It doesn't feel good. It's very convincing. Um, so then there's the likely story, which is where science fits in. Not our current scientific findings, but the whole process of science, which is trying to get our relationships out of the way, trying to get our preferences for the likable out of the way so that we can um, so that uh, so that we can see reality, because in the long term we don't just have to get along with ourselves, feeling good about ourselves. We don't have to just get along with others. We have to get along with reality. And and it's not fucking around. It's not a nurturing mother nature or a wicked stepmother. It's neutral, but we have to get along with it or we're screwed. If there's anything that we've learned from all of our science and all of that, it's adapt to reality or die. Okay, we can talk about what reality means. I have a definition for it. I will not tell you what reality contains. I can tell you what I guess it contains. I have been. Um, but so now notice the tension between those three possibilities, those three imperatives. Likable. I want it to feel good to me. That's my most urgent priority. I want to feel good about myself. Um, Likely, what's reality got in store for us? Climate change, for an example, of something that, you know, it's not like you can just wish it away. And then in between, I've got the locally like story. So, for example, being parasitic on my parents, um, instinctually parasitic. Humans are born with a particular appetite for what their parents say. Not all of them. I have a son who seemed to have been born without that. My firstborn, intense. But most of us look to our parents or our society for what's true. Like when your parents tell you don't cross the street without looking both ways, they're actually representing the likely story to you, which is you'd get killed if you didn't look both ways. So, in a way, they are our reality checks. But as you know, they are also local. They're busy pandering to their relationships. So, if you grew up in a household that was um, where your friends and your parents, your local society was all saturated with certain beliefs that basically were the beliefs that made them feel good, like a religious belief or something like that. You start to recognize, no, in some ways they don't represent reality. So we're kind of torn between those two. Between the two signals we can get from society, the reality checks and also the pandering delusions. Okay, so I would not say it just comes down to health, wealth, and relationships. But then again, my framework is a different one. My framework is looking broader than those obvious categories. And yet I could fit them in there. I have to be paying attention to both reality and the local delusions if I want to live. And we're entering the Trump era when our safety could be at risk because we don't toe the party line. I don't know if it'll get that bad. It could. Um, Wealth certainly could get that bad, and for the wealth accumulators, it's a bunch of them. I mean, I talk to them. These are people who say, that they're patriots, but then they don't mean it at all. They're just voting based on crypto or something like that, or that the price of butter went up. So they're not actually paying attention to what's better for society in the long run, given reality. And then relationships, I got to tell you, they feel the most important to us. And I think that's largely because we need the reassurance. I I hope that someone who's watching gets a little more comfort or freedom from hanging out with me. They don't have to become like me, but if they are drawn in the directions I'm drawn, to know that there's someone else who's actually doing this and is comfortable doing it like me, that has always been really pretty crucial to me. I don't need all of society to go along with, but I do need a couple of other role models, for which I've been very lucky, in order to feel like I could, that it was safe to do what doing with my life. Okay. Jackknife says, likable, likely, liked. Help me understand better with goal examples for number 2 and number 3. Okay. Likely. Um, it's likely that if you step out past a cliff, you'll fall and die. That's just about what's likely in the physical world. Um, and it's real. It matters to us. So so that's where I think science operates. Science basically says, to get to the likely story, I'm going to make this up. I've said it a different way. I'm going to make it up a different way. This way. If to get to the likely story, set aside your liked story, your liked and likable story long enough to see what's likely. I've said it before, is to get what you want, set aside what you want long enough to see what is. Some Buddhist says truth waits for eyes unclouded by longing. Scientists, I know lots of them. Some of them have big egos, some of them don't. But one thing about the scientific process is you're actually being paid to to cut each other off at the knees. It's basically WWF around what's actually most likely. So scientists, unlike religious people, there's an assumption that if we find better evidence for a different plan, even though you liked your plan, if you find evidence for a different explanation, even though if you liked your explanation, you're going to set aside your liking of it because we're going with the better explanation. That's the assumption behind the likely. Now, the liked is what I mean by liked is the locally liked. And local has changed a lot. I mean, after all, you guys live miles from me and I live miles from you. But what I mean is that your social circle, the who matters to you. And this is another thing I've noticed about myself lately. Um, Linda says, yeah, relationships were also part of the evolutionary survival strategy. No joke. For hundreds, what is it? 100 think it's 150 million years that there's sex. And before that, there's all sorts of horizontal gene transfer. I may have the 150 million wrong. I'm not great on dates, um, but you could say in primates, in humans, yeah, no, it's a major driver for us. But what I'm saying is that it's different in humans than it is in dogs or cats or other creatures because we have language. Language has it has imposed a huge overlay. You could say there are two forces converging: the need for what we call biological reproductive success, and all of the status, all the arm candy, trophy wife kind of stuff that comes with it, that makes it so a a dog of a guy could say at a men's party, "Look, I need to find a partner because I got to get knock my boots, at least once a month." It would be harder, more embarrassing for him to say, "I need a partner because I'm not always very confident and I need a source of reassurance." Um, and so that's the part I'm talking about. That's the addition that humans deal with that other organisms don't deal with. Yeah, biological reproductive success is a major driver. And I went through decades of hormonal conviction, just the compulsion to find a partner, to have a partner. Even back then, it was dovetailed with my need for libido, the affirmation I got from a partnership. But more and more as time passed, and Linda, you might know this from friends or something like that. If you know people who are still dating late in life, I know a lot of women who are, and with very mixed results. I know some with great success, um, who really wanted it, really needed it. But there are guys out there now, and probably women too, though I probably know more about the guy side of it, who are chasing tail the way a dog might chase a parked car. They don't really know what they want to do with it anymore. It's a compulsion. It's something that it was a source of affirmation, and so they got addicted to that source, and they kind of still assume they need it. They find their partners almost immediately annoying and don't know why their partner keeps bugging them. They're a real problem in the dating world. A problem I would suggest is probably stronger for women than it is for men. I mean, there are men who have that problem with finding a partner who's serious about it, but I think I'm hearing more from women who are having a problem. Okay, language can make us delusional and hallucinatory. They are very similar. This is Michael talking, and I'm saying it makes us the visionary and delusional creatures we are. And I would say that the prognosis is not great for language as a adaptation, because it makes us visionary enough to get way ahead of ourselves technologically, and delusional enough to deny that we've gotten way ahead of ourselves in technology. So the prognosis is not good for us. It doesn't affect my work. I'm highly motivated in my work, but if I were to guess what will kill any language using species, it's the combination of the technological capacities we have to outrun ourselves and the denialism that's possible with it. So we can make ourselves really anxious through all our interactions, all the messing with each other's minds that we can do with language that other creatures can't do. They mess with each other's minds, but not to the degree we can. And then the denial of the mess we're making. So it's a delusional death spiral. Is that reality would get rough, and we would go into denial, checking out, escaping from it, thereby neglecting it, thereby it getting worse, thereby us checking out more. And I think this week we're going to start to see a major tectonic shift in like plate shift, like settling. We're going to be falling into that further than we have in our memory. I mean, actually, there's plenty of precedent for Trumpism, but I do think it's a different version of fascism or dictatorship or any of that. I think he has unleashed on the world something we've been trying to keep underground keep suppressed for a long time, which is that any dumbass can claim perfect confidence, perfectly unearned. That you don't need to know anything, you don't need to think at all in order to simply be 100% sure of yourself, and anybody who disagrees with you is stupid. And it's not just associated with the Trump lifestyle brand. I think we're going to see a lot of people get prickly that way. For whatever cause, whatever lifestyle brand. It's just that he's unleashed that you can do that. You don't have to earn any status. You could simply declare yourself a legend you can just be a legend in your own mind, and then people will follow you, or people will back off. People will do either thing. They'll either back down off and surrender because you're such a pain in the ass, or they'll get on board because it's so much fun. So no, it's a major worry. I'm losing sleep over it these days, but there it is. And I'm losing sleep, and then I get up in the morning and go to work on this stuff, because I guess for me a consolation prize is having something to do about it. So I translate my anxiety into curiosity and productivity, and I put out my videos, and I get a little addicted to audience, and then the audience declines, and then I remember, wait, I will, to the end of my days, I want to, if I can afford to, take as careful notes as I can about what the fuck this all is. It just seems like a delightful thing that a person can do, and you can only do with language. That is, other creatures can't do it. Okay, it's also far safer to be in a group with the people you live and work with in red areas. Um, yes, I think I know what you mean here. That is, you need your subculture within a culture that's different from yours. And I think this relates to what I was talking about before. I need a few people. Oh, I think I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying. You're saying, no, this is a huge point. It shows up in the video I just posted. Um, there's, uh, I looked up the word devote this week, and it actually literally means to unvote, to surrender your vote. To be devoted is a proud version of that. That is, people think it's important to be devoted, but I'm actually saying there's a kind of surrender um, where you're deferential to your larger group, um, and uh, and and so it's all, and also, I mean, I'm a really good example of this. I really didn't know what to do with myself for the first 40 years. I worked all the time, but I didn't know what I was good for until about 30 years ago. Um, which meant that I was the kind of guy who would say, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know. I I'm probably gonna screw this up. Someone else take over. Or um, I don't know what I want. I'll have whatever they're having. So, Linda, I think that's what you're speaking to, which is the in-group feeling, the way in which a cluster of people can become self-affirming. And back to Jackknife, that's what I'm talking about, is the liked story. It's a locally liked story. And it's a major source of affirmation. I also illustrated a few minutes ago when I said that I can do whatever, I can take on whatever lifestyle so long as I have a couple of exemplars of it someplace. Um, as long as I know someone else is doing it, it's okay if I do it. And it's very dangerous that we feel that way. It's part of groupthink, in group, all of that sort of stuff. So, and back to one more thing related to Jackknife's issue. This is a fundamental paradox I deal with. I am trying to be as realistic as possible, including being realistic about how unrealistic you have to be to live a human life. So when I talk to religious people, I have to say to them, no, I don't believe in some name droppable imaginary friend in the sky. But don't get me wrong, I'm just as delusional as you are. Um, I have my egotainment forms too. A human needs them. It's part of how I deal with the Trumpists, which is self-love is essential, but get a room, do it right. That's what that egotainment video is about. Um, Delightful to hear, Michael. Uh, uh, Someone's writing in. There's two people are writing in Latin. Um, I missed it. Like I said, I had no idea what I was good for. The closest I got as a junior in high school was deciding that I should become an orchestral bassoonist because someone said he would be able to tell me whether I had it in me within a year. I was that disoriented. So I miss Latin. So can you give me what these two terms mean, Jeff? And you bought it, and name it. You you bought it and named it. Can you give them to me? Junior Classical League, baby. No, I could have used it. I didn't know. It's a little bit like one of those video games where you don't know which tools to pick up. Yeah, you pick up them all, but in this life, you find out later in life that you missed out on some tools that you could really use. Peace be with you. That one I know. That there we go. Peace be with you. Yeah, which makes it really challenging for some people to try to disturb the people who go around disturbing everybody. Okay, so jackknives. Here we go. I struggle with what's worth doing. That's why I asked about the framework. Based on my framework, it sounds like you have a health goal. On your framework, what are your goals? Thank you. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing from you, Jackknife, you provided categories, but what actually do you do to fulfill them? So I think I have a better sense now that you framed it this way. Um, I wished everybody I knew on Facebook uh, good addictions in the coming year. Um, to me, addiction and love are two opposite sounding words for the same process. What does it mean? It means to focus. It means to narrow in, to do dedicated work to maintain something that you're dependent upon. So to be addicted to something, I'm addicted, for example, to grocery stores. I no longer know how to farm. I've lost the ability to do that. So I'm addicted to them. It's not love, but it's on that spectrum. I prefer the existence of them to their non-existence. And when it comes to them, uh, it doesn't matter which one, but I am addicted to my work. And that's what I think you're looking for, Jackknife. That's what I lacked for my first 40 years. I get enthusiastic about something, but I didn't. I it didn't feel as addictive as what I'm doing now. So I don't actually have a plateau I am looking to reach. And this is not this is not a reflection on your life, Jackknife. I'm saying that I'm just describing what happened for me. I'm addicted to a few things besides the obvious, like food and health and those things. I'm addicted to this research. I get up every day enthusiastic about doing it. I feel incredibly lucky to have work like this because my happiness comes from having work for which I have infinite patience, and it turns out I do for this. And I mean dumb luck. And I also mean that it took me a long time, and also that I was not in the situation most people are in that I had the freedom to change work. Most people don't. I had a modest inheritance, enough that I could get by at an entry level position starting into something new. So I don't want, I have to disclose that because when I'm talking to someone who's struggling for enough money to get by, it's not okay for me to pretend like I know what that's like. No, I had an inheritance. And I asked my dad why he gave it to me. And he said, because the most important work in the world doesn't pay well. It meant teaching and things like that. So there was a way in which he kind of inspired me in this direction. But I was all over the map. I founded a national lobbying organization with 75 chapters. I worked as a marketing professional. I got a master's in public policy after, it did all sorts of work around social change, environmentalism, various things. I lived for 7 years on the world's largest hippie commune, where I did all sorts of jobs. I was carpenter, roofer, plumber, worked 2.5 years in Guatemala. And this relates to what I also have to mention to you, Jackknife, is in my parents' generation, these are people who grew up in the mid 20s, 1920s. They were born in the 1920s. Um, it was clearer what you could do, and it was plainer what you could do. My dad went into his dad's business. By the time I came along, it was much more confusing to figure out what to do, partly because there were so many more options, and partly because it was getting more and more competitive. Um, and your generation, I don't know how old you are, Jackknife, but my sense is that you probably are younger than me. It's it's such a clusterfuck. It's so hard to figure out what's worth trying to do. Uh, my heart goes out to you. If you want, let's talk sometime. Email me, and we can talk, and I can listen to you and figure out what you are most inclined to do and help you with that. I'd be happy to help with that. Um, n- you know, because sometimes an ear, an outside ear, listening to that. But yeah, you're looking for savings, you're looking for health, you're looking for um, relationship. And the trouble is, everybody is. I've been reading this wonderful book by Peter Turchin. I recommend it to you. It's called End Times. It's a guy, he's this ecologist statistician who switched over into studying history and came upon a pattern that relates to what we're talking about here, Jackknife, which is uh, he calls it elite overproduction. That he has seen a pattern, and the statistical methods are sound for this, that suggests that when a society starts overproducing aspirants to reach the elite, it becomes cutthroat, and then you end up with populist movements and revolutions like the kind we're seeing right now with the Trumpists. So I would say that Trump is to some extent us all struggling with what's worth doing in a world where it's gotten more and more cutthroat. I was talking to some recent young PhDs. I got a 27-year-old guy who asked me to become his godfather. Lovely guy. Just got his PhD in philosophy. He is going to be, he's now looking for jobs, and what he describes as a nightmare. And then I go talk to my research colleague, Terry Deacon, who just retired emeritus after teaching at Harvard and Berkeley, senior professor. And he says, it was dumb luck. I lived at a time when you could get a job like that. It's fucking hard these days. People go for 5 postdocs, and that's just in the academic world. So if you want, one thing you can do, Jackknife, if you're looking for a way to go at this, is to actually broaden. You have 2 choices. One is to get really practical about it, and that's sort of what you're doing here when you talk about health, wealth, and relationships. The other is to zoom out a little bit. And that's what my framework is more likely to be useful for. Zoom out so that you can zoom in. It's this business where to get what you want, set aside what you want long enough to see what is. And one of the things I do in my private consulting practice is I help people uncover their ambivalences. I kind of talk like your future self by listening really closely and listening to where you're saying opposite things and helping you ease into a conversation with your future self, because talking to your future self is enough to make you nervous. Uh, and I'm not your future self, but because I don't actually care what you do as long as it's as long as it's satisfying to you and not world damaging. I can just employ the power of neutral thinking, listen to you, and try to help you figure out a practical route to go. That's what I do. That's one of my consulting things. Okay, now wish I had something to contribute. Just wanted to thank you for your excellent services. Help me through the election. Interesting. Now, your title, your name is Anne Rand Paul Ryan. If you feel like it, let me know how that relates to actually liking my work. I got a good buddy who's part of the Origins of Life research who thinks that it all relates to Ayn Rand. That is, he's feeling like he's getting more Ayn Rand ideas from it. And that is not my sense of it. I would say that the Ayn Rand thing is a form of egotainment more than realism. That is, most people, the books that sell are the ones that make the reader feel like an instant genius. And Ayn Rand, what's his name, the current one? A bunch of public intellectuals play that role. And Ayn Rand did it in spades. She made everybody feel like a unique hero living in a world of fools. Over the break, I did get into VR exercise. I was looking for a new form of exercise. I had gotten into it years ago during the COVID thing. Let's see. Yes, sorry. I'll get right back to VR and how it relates. So the vote for Trump and the public reaction to Luigi Mangione could be read as the same reaction. Yes, I think so. Remember, in the kind of work I'm doing, I'm stripping out of it a lifestyle. I don't give a fuck what lifestyle you have. It's not relevant. I'm talking about human beings. And so, yes, you'll end up with cults and countercults. And I think you're drawing a connection to the Peter Turchin work. Yeah, they would both be reactions. They would both be populist reactions to the ways in which we feel thwarted in our lives. The ways in which our expectations aren't being met. And that's what elite overproduction does from Turchin's perspective. If you don't want to read the book, by the way, I never sit down and read a book. I listen to books. but if you're looking for Turchin, you can get a summary of him through any video. There's lots of videos about him, including great interviews with him. Um, yeah, just a, and what I'm doing in my life is I just feed myself all of this stuff. I read an amazing book that I strongly recommend, delightful, entertaining, short. It's called Wit's End. Um, if you email me, I will send you an audio version of it. It's ingenious and it's a heart after my own mind. It's a, yeah, hard after my own mind. It's a brilliant book about why wit is so important. And basically, what I'm trying to do is keep my wits about me and keep on cultivating them. Um, populist comment you made. There we go. Good. Good. I did make that connection, not immediately. Um, let's see. Let's see. Oh, I just the thing I was going to mention about video games. So that's now a form of egotainment. I'm playing a game called Pistol Whip. Um, I'm not. I miss the video game thing, and so I'm a little dim about it. But I like this game, and like what it is metaphysically. So you're on a track, you're like that, like one of those moving roads, and there are uh, uh, people shooting at you from every direction, and there's throbbing pop music playing in the background, and you've got guns and you're shooting at them, and then there are people in front of you and you're whipping them out of the way. And what is it really, what's going on metaphysically there? I think it's this human appetite. uh they're actually in all organisms, and they're not that they can, it's not as nuanced as it is in human, but it's basically you're running the gauntlet of life, and you're killing everything that is in your way, and you're dancing. So the point in this game is you're supposed to shoot and dodge bullets to the beat. So you're actually dancing your way through uh, uh, anything that could possibly snub you. And I think that is part of the I think that's actually ties together the Luigi and Trump response. That's the state we would want to get into. And I love getting into it in safe escapism. As you take off the headphones afterwards and you're back to your reality. It's not a question of how far out you go, it's whether you remember to come back. And I think that I think that VR is interesting this way. It is total immersion. It is the only art form I could say is actual total immersion. You're really convinced you're someplace else. And it's always a surprise to take off your glasses. Well, Trumpism is total immersion as well. That's the problem with it. Um, the difference is that you take off your goggles after you're in VR and you notice the contrast. It's basically Plato's cave and a healthy response to it. So the problem with Plato's cave is that people come out of it and they think that they've been struck by light, and they're enlightened now, and their duty is, their obligation is to go in and save the world from the deluded. A very dangerous, problematic aspect of Plato's thinking. To me, as I posted on the YouTube thing, I want everybody to wake up, but chiefly to the fact that they will not off again and therefore must remain vigilant. And I think there's a way in which VR might help with that, because the revelation you need when you come out of Plato's cave is, oh, apparently I'm gullible. That's the right response to it. Likewise, the wake up call you should get from taking the red pill is, oh, I took the blue pill. That is, it's guesswork trying to figure out what's true. And is there a better way to advance my relationship goals, like playing a new sport or taking up chess? Just thinking out loud. Okay, that's this is where, let's have a conversation. We can even do it this afternoon if you want. Email me. It depends what kind of relationship or what you're after, but yes, having something to do with other people is a source of relationship. I've gotten a whole lot out of playing music. I play jazz and funk and soul and that kind of stuff. And that means that I'm basically having a very platonic form of sensual pleasure with a bunch of usually frumpy guys. Um, and I remember after one gig, saying to the drummer, who's a friend, I said, okay, which would you rather have, the conversation we just had or the conversation they're having over that table, um, where, a young couple that's trying to get together. And he said our conversation. I even made a T-shirt. There's a time I was making T-shirts with this stuff on it. Sex is music for non-musicians. That is, there's something about music. It would also be true to some extent of sports, though in a way it's less sensual. Music is really all about sensuality. Um, but yes, you gotta have to have something that you're doing where you're jamming with other people is great fun. And then you get to figure out how much of it you need locally, how much of a commitment you want to make to it. Um, uh, I know older folks. I know this probably doesn't speak to you, Jackknife, but I knew uh, a woman who was really not didn't have any wind in her sails until she found pickleball, and now she's just thrilled. Uh, yeah, so there's all that. Let's see. That's part two of my earlier. Okay, there we go. Yes. So Jackknife, you and I can talk. Let me see if there's anything else. I have and to Lego. Michael, I have to tell you something about Lego. So I have two grandsons, 7 and 4. And the 7-year-old is absolutely dedicated. He's completely convinced that he will become a Lego professional. That that's what he's actually going to do with his life. That he's going to become one of the 50. Talk about elite overproduction. And so one of the things I've been doing with him is telling him future stories, which is a tradition. I told them to my kids as well, where I basically, it's like fork finding missions into the future, where I say, okay, this is what happened to you, and you tell a whole story that ends up out in one direction, and another one uh, that heads out in a different direction. My daughter still can't forgive me for a story I told her in which she grew up to become a lesbian chicken farmer. Um, but anyway, no, apparently the thing about Legos can last a long time. And what is it about Legos? What is it about so many of these things we do? It's that sense of competence. I worked in construction for a while. It's in a way tidier work than what I do now. I loved it. I loved that I could follow instructions and end up with something practical. Um, uh, so I'm guessing that's part of the joy of Lego. But anyway, more power to you. Everybody's got a thing, and as Stevie Wonder says, some don't know how to handle it, and that's where the psychoproctology comes in. Is that we all have this appetite for affirmation. I've never met anybody who doesn't. The closest would be my research partner, who just he's some kind of he's a yeah, he just doesn't seem to care. I've never heard him toot his horn once. It's the strangest thing. But we all need our affirmation. He does too. Most of us, I think, what you could say about him is, okay. Here's another example of that. I have a biologist friend who grew to quite high fame as a biologist, geneticist, um, who said to me she doesn't think she needs affirmation, and I said, well, for one thing, you're 85 and you probably lost some of the appetite for it you once had. But the other thing is you're completely reliant on it. You've got your family all around you. You've got your fame in academic circles. Basically, you don't miss your water till your well runs dry. So I think we all need our affirmation. We all have an appetite for it. We're getting it somewhere. As soon as we get it, we try to forget that we get it there because we need to not feel needy, and we take it for granted. And that can work or not work, depending. I mean, I'd say that that's the difference between love and addiction. Love is the assumption that what you're dependent upon for your affirmation is likely to stick around and not end badly. Addiction is the assumption that it will end badly. And one of the things I say with Terry when we go out walking, he's 74 now, is it doesn't end well. That is, no matter what we get addicted to, it doesn't end well. And so the question is, how do you throw all into a life and get all that joy and affirmation out of it, knowing that you're going to be thrown out of life? Um, yeah, wow. Uh, okay, let me see if there's anything else, and then I'm going to let this one end. Thank you for showing up, you guys. I mean, I wondered how many people would, and if it hadn't worked out, um, Oh, Soren, you say wit is part of play, a basic human emotion. Yes, it is. It is that, and I would love to get you a copy of this book because I think it plays that out in interesting ways. So back to Jackknife's point, even though he's not here anymore, um, to have found an area of serious play is the greatest joy. That is to have a focus, something you're addicted to, you're doing dedicated work, you're not just dithering, not just anything goes, and playing within that arena, which is what I do with ideas, what Michael does with Legos and all of that, to be playing within its rules, which can include making up new rules, uh, is is a great joy, and and wit and wisdom obviously come from the same root, and there's something more to it than that, and it's caught in this phrase. So the video I just put out actually deals with this. Um, you know how someone's gay? Seriously, I'm just kidding, or just kidding, I'm serious. That's actually one of the founding concepts in philosophy. One of the earliest brain teasers is the liar's paradox, which is um, it's true that I'm lying, or it's just I'm lying, um, which is both serious and playful, and uh, it's confused researchers for millennia now. Um, and because it's true if it's false and false if it's true. That is, if it's true that I'm lying, then it's false that I'm lying, which means that if it's false I'm lying, then it's true that I'm lying. Um, so if you watch the video I put out an hour ago, it's dealing with how that is the issue from the beginning of life and why I ended up an ironist, or a more accurate term is a dironist, dire irony. Um, it's very serious. Life is incredibly white knuckle ride serious. And it's also slapstick. It's tragic comic that way. And what I'd wish for everyone is that they get a chance to experience that in their lifetime. That's not just a white knuckle ride. That's not just a joke. You can become a fundamentalist hypocrite if you take it if you take yourself too seriously in the cutthroat tensions of life, or you can become a cynical uh, hypocrite, like it's all a crapshoot, and it's just for play. Life is a game, that kind of crap. Um, and I'm saying that no, actually, the hard part of life is dealing with those fundamental tensions, including the one I just mentioned, which is how to throw all into life, knowing you'll be thrown out. That's and so in answer, what came to me, it's not just learning for me; it's paradoxes. I I ended up being a guy who was intellectually bi-curious, meaning when I hear someone speaking out both sides of their mouth, including me, especially me, even though I'll have blind spots about my own hypocrisies, I lap it up. I just love that shit because I always learn something from paradoxes. Mostly, I learned that I have to figure out, for example, when to be serious and when to be playful. Um, uh, from my perspective, all of the moral edicts that you hear all the time are paradoxical. You shouldn't be judgmental. Do not be negative. Commit yourself to flexibility. Be intolerant of intolerance. Even the golden rule is actually a paradox. So to see those things is always how I generate new ideas. I move towards those. And I think the other tendency, which is not very witty, is to claim clarity as if free from all ambiguities, as if you've solved reality, as if so. The liar's paradox is at the heart of what's called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. It's mentioned and cited in my video, so you can connect it. You can go there. My video I have called Gödel Mighty, Godel Mighty, is dealing with that paradox, the Gödel's paradox, but it undergirds most of my work. That's what's going on in most of my work. Realizing, yes. So I look for paradoxes to live by, So when I hear something like "do not be negative," I don't say, "No, really, do not be negative," which would be the fundamentalist response. I don't say, "Ha, what a load of crap." It's hypocritical to say, uh, um, "Do not be negative," and therefore I don't have to pay any attention to that. No, what I realize is that lifelong I will be trying to figure out when to be negative and when not to be negative. That's what the paradoxes show me, is that life is actually this guesswork between options, often between paired opposites. Okay, so it's interesting though. There is no term for paradoxophobia other than xenophobia, which is interesting because Zeno, spelled with a Z, was the founder of. He came up with Zeno's paradoxes, but this is xenophobia, fear of the unfamiliar, fear of the strange. Um, and I think that it probably manifests in part as what I've been calling autophobia, fear of the strangeness of being us. To be me is strange. It's strange to me. So there's a way in which I would want to sidestep looking squarely at me. And I ended up with a life that's a little different from that. Wouldn't the paradox be better described as the literal mind cannot understand the ironic mind? Um, that's interesting. Let me think about this a second. Um, Well, it's certainly the case that literal minds would have a hard time understanding ironic minds, and I would also say it's motivated. Um, uh, I did coin the term motivated ADHD last week. Yeah, when I coin a term, uh, it's not national news. It's how I think. That is, to name it is to tame it. I'll name something. So motivated ADHD is the flitting around we do to avoid looking at something. So a literal mind probably doesn't want to focus hard enough to see the binds we're in. Um, I don't know which paradox that would be. I'm not sure when you say, wouldn't the paradox be better described as? Um, I would say that's a paradox, which is what do you do when you're dealing with a literal mind? And I should mention this too. We are this group we have, the psychopractology study group, has met 3 times so far. It's meeting again tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, California time. Anybody's invited. You're all welcome. It's a grooving group. These are good people, and they're really trying to figure out what to do with the, you could say, literal figurative minds that are the Trumpists or anybody who has come away has completely atrophied their curiosity. They've extinguished their curiosity. So what do you do with someone who's curious is you try to pique out their curiosity. But what do you do with someone who's basically I coined a term for this the other day, self-defecated. They've shit themselves out of their suit of armor. And so you can't get them. You can't reach them. So the Trumpists are like that. These are people who, no matter what you say, they have a reason why they don't have to listen to. So the group tomorrow is dealing with those kinds of literal minds. Are they literal? No, they're not literal. They'll say anything, but they'll come across as literal minded because they need to play supreme judge. Um, uh, an example of this would be if someone says to you something in so many words, and then you say that uh, they just said it, and they say, "I didn't say that literally." So that's an evasive move. That's a motivated ADHD move. Um, and I think to some extent we all need it. I speed read hate mail. What am I going to pour over that stuff in detail? No, I'm going to flit in and out of it. Why? Again, because we need our mojo. We need our mojo. So, how to handle that need for mojo, what we call confirmation bias. Once again, I think that's the distinction I make it. I make it in this video again yesterday. I tend to repeat myself when I've got an idea that keeps on being useful. But uh, to me, the difference between decent folks and assholes is that decent folks recognize that their confirmation and bias is a problem they have to manage, and assholes treat confirmation bias as a solution to all their problems. So, would I call a Trumpist literal minded? No, they're whatever minded makes it so they win in the moment. I don't think, I mean, you could say that they're, uh, they're, it's literally mindless. That is, if you self-defecate yourself out of your suit of armor and let everybody attack it, and you play the judge above it all, saying the suit of armor won, that's mindless. It's a mindless game that I'm afraid we're going to see a whole lot more of in the year 2025. And so, how to deal with it? I really invite you. Just email me your email address, and you can come and join us tomorrow. I'll send you where we're linked up tomorrow, and where we're having this conversation. It's private. Your name won't be shared. Yeah, that one is important to me, Michael, and it came from this work I've been doing for 20 years, where I had to ask myself a paradoxical question: what is a butthead? Since it can't just be whoever I happen to butt heads with. Okay, so all right. So, any last things? Good Lord, it's so kind of you guys to be here with me, and I'm very grateful for the company. Um, it's not kindness. It's no. I guess what I mean is I like that you're here. I like that you're here, and I like that you're curious. Um, I'd be doing this work even if I was doing it alone. But boy, does company make a difference to it. To have people to wonder with. And I really want you guys to wonder hard with and at me. Remember where I started here. To have friends who you can duke it out with lovingly. The truth emerges from disagreements among friends, is how David Hume put it. And it's what I had with that poet, the Nobel poet Louis Glick, is that we could duke it out, and it wasn't about us personally. We're trying to figure out what the fuck the world was. And so I'm sharing knowledge as PPTX says, but also this is a jam session. The reason I set up that study group is I wanted to actually be able to interact. I didn't like the high horse of being video talking to you while you guys write on the side. But let's do more. Okay. So I'll see you guys in a few weeks. Thanks again for joining me. Thank you a lot, and I'll see you next time. All right. Goodbye.